Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tom and Joe Show. I am Tom.
I'm Joe.
And we're talking about a big album today, one of those large albums that we occasionally we seem to talk about on this thing. We're back in Metallica land. We're talking
Wait. I thought we were talking about the 1989 film Puppet Master?
No, we're talking about Master of Puppets. We're talking about Metallica's
so the
Master of
1994 movie, The Puppet Masters.
No.
Okay.
No. All I know about those films is that the guy.
That's why you were making a big deal about it. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it.
All I know about those films is that the guy from The Room, who's not Tommy Wiseau, is in like one of them, and it's probably like most of his IMDb page. Yeah. We're talking Master of Puppets today, the third album by Metallica, released on this day, the 3rd of March, 1986. This album is now 40. God. This is a big one.
Which makes me over 40.
Yes, this is one of those albums. This like 1986 is a fantastic year for heavy metal. I think it's fair to say, like 1986 albums for heavy metal are, this. A little band called Megadeth's Peace Sells, but who's buying Slayer's, obviously Slayer's Rain in Blood. This is a good year for thrash metal to start with, but there's a lot of really good metal records out in this thing. And I did sort of consider doing like Slayer's Rain in Blood, but it's kind of short. And basically, once you sort of got to the whole sensibility of the Slayer formula, it kind of becomes a little bit redundant, a little bit contrived. It's sort of like, well, once you've heard like 3 Slayer songs, you sort of see that. And obviously, other things also came out in this year, like Iron Maiden's Somewhere in Time, and the AC/DC album that was basically Who Made Who, which was attached to terrible Stephen King film Maximum Overdrive. It was a very strange year.
Yes,
it's the best and worst film that Stephen King has ever directed. But 1986 is also a really good year for like music in general. You've got, obviously, License to Ill, Peter Gabriel's. So it's sort of in that weird interregnum between sort of like pop, basically the sort of 80s, the sort of typical thing like you think of when you think of 80s and Stranger Things. We'll get to Stranger Things later. But then also before really everything sort of goes into that weird late 80s mush of sort of stuff like Rat and Poison, and it's like, oh, why do all of our metal bands why do all of our hair metal bands sort of why have they got hair like 3 foot high, and then grunge came along and killed all of that. Anyway, so we're talking Master of Puppets today. It's third album by Metallica. Where do we? Because obviously we have talked like quite a lot about like where Metallica were in 1984, and really what they've done between here and 1986 is basically got bigger. This is basically. Yes. So obviously we've talked for nearly over 2 hours about Ride the Lightning. Ride the Lightning is a fantastic record. The kind of thing with Master of Puppets is this is kind of more and better. The biggest thing is Metallica changed labels to Elektra, who I think they were on until basically quite recently. And Metallica were doing big tours and playing things like the Monsters of Rock festival alongside Bon Jovi and Rat. Remember Rat? No, nobody remembers Rat. Rat don't
Round
remember.
and round. We actually do have like a Geico commercial or something like that with Rat in it, because they do like we have we like got this house, but we have a rat problem, and then you just see Rat playing round and round. So instead of all of our American fans like, yeah, I've seen that ad 1,000 times. You don't have to describe it, but I have a British co-host, so we have to explain things sometimes.
Yes, it's kind of like that old Simpsons thing of, we're not White Snake, we're Poison. I thought we were Quiet Riot. It's like, they basically, the problem is this is and sort of something that Metallica managed to escape by being, a thrash metal band rather than a traditional metal band, is basically they sort of escaped the glam sort of rock fucking in short. Obviously, they went and did something very, very progressive in, And Justice for All, an album with extremely odd production, but we'll get to that at some point, perhaps in a couple of years. So basically, yeah, Metallica have been getting bigger and doing more touring, and they basically go right back into the studio to do another one, and this is where things sort of get really interesting. We're going to obviously talk about the tracks as we do normally. The band are, Christ almighty, do I need to go through the members of Metallica? I'm pretty sure we know, who's in Metallica?
Yeah. Yes. James Hetfield. Yeah. Lars. Cliff.
Cliff. And Kirk. The most interesting thing, one of the things, during this period, which kind of indicates the sort of money that Metallica were making by this point, as he says, as he liberally steals from the Pitchfork article, is basically Kirk Hammett just started buying expensive comic books, and that's sort of the money that Metallica had at that point. That's the sort of hey, I want to buy, Fantastic Four number 1, which goes for about $60,000, now. Fuck it, says Kirk, I'll buy one of those. I've read a lot of the entire of Birth, but the beautifully titled Birth, School, Metallica, Death, which is a really good oral history of the band, and this is basically where the overindulgences and the drug taking and the other stuff sort of takes place, but also when you are 25 odd and you are making more money than God, sort of doing a touring, and basically your outlets are more musical instruments and booze and comic books. That's kind of what happens, and that kind of ties into this. I think it's fair to say that the theme of Master of Puppets is sort of power and corruption, but also control. I think is the biggest sort of theme.
Master of Puppets is definitely about control.
Yeah.
Though, it's hard to tell because it's so subtle about it, but I think we can find an underlying theme that links up to that idea.
Yeah, there's sort of a general thing, and obviously I think a lot of it was because Metallica were doing drugs by that point. It was it's easy to empathize with people who chop their breakfast on a mirror when you are yourself doing drugs. Kind of the most interesting thing about the recording process of this is, because we're already talking about the recording process, because I said, so the kind of the easiest thing to sort of talk about is the recording process on this, because they went back to Denmark and it was very cold, and they did stuff. The strangest sort of little side story of the recording of this is that Geddy Lee could have produced Master of Puppets, which is a very strange thing to do. Obviously it was produced, as most of the Metallica albums were of this period, by the amazingly named Flaming Ramnusson, who did obviously this Ride the Lightning and Injustice for All, and Lars took some drum lessons. And Kirk Hammett went and hung around with Joe Satriani for a bit, because it was that sort of era.
Yeah.
It's
Joe Satriani is just one of those guys who made every other great guitar person, Steve Vai and all those.
Yeah, he was I think if I remember correctly, Kirk, I think I'm trying to remember if Satriani was Kirk's guitar teacher or the other way around. There's definitely always been a long-term link with them, and Joe Satriani is great. If you want to go and listen to a good Joe Satriani album, it's probably 1989 Surfing with the Alien, which is just kind of the arrival of this whole new style of playing the guitar, and sort of led to a lot of that sort of very 90s, that very 80s sort of 80s early 90s sort of shredding sort of stuff, where it's great. You know, you're gonna do all that sort of widdly guitar stuff. But you know, he's great. He's a good guitarist. I like Joe Satriani. He goes and does loads of tours with like other guitarists who also, you know, like Steve Vai, who basically also goes around the world and just plays in every other metal band and stuff. You know, this is sort of the rarefied air Metallica are in this period. It's like, hey Joe, do you want to hang out? And you know, that sort of area. There isn't really very much to say about like, you know, this record, because it took like basically 3 months to make, you know, in terms of recording. Most of the stuff was like had been, you know, road tested. There's like really rough. There was a demo tape going around quite some time ago with obviously really rough stuff, sort of, you know, mixes of it, and it's like, it sounds crude, but it's like, yeah, that's like 6 months before they bothered going into the studio. By the time they, you know, they went into the studio, it's like they had the thing just basically ready to go. Apart from Orion and the thing that should not be, which obviously, you know, Orion is a really good track, and we'll get to Orion shortly. And there's, you know, this is kind of the kind of thing, and I think this is an ethos that Metallica have sort of always brought with them. Is you sort of listen to this, and then you listen to sort of, you know, I don't know, something like Slippery When Wet, which came out in exactly the same year, and you know, it's like it's so night and day. It's not even like amusingly like they basically don't, you know, should both describe both of these as quote unquote heavy metal seems really sort of like, you know, you know, weird, and so, you know, you've got this ultra polished sort of sensibility, and then you've got this sort of up against it, and it's like this is yeah.
I mean, but it still feels like Metallica's most organized. Like,
oh no, completely.
Definitely organized. It's just it's very weird that like at this point you have two, you know, godlike influences on, you know, guitarists or whatever else. You have Metallica, or you have Van Halen.
Oh yeah, completely. You know,
that kind of feels like ultimately, I mean, you could have some sub things, but like the little maze leads back to these two. If you're going to be a guitarist in the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, Van Halen released, by the way, 5150 within like a month, within like weeks of Master of Puppets, which is like, you know, it is very polished and very. This is obviously the first time that they had Sammy Hagar. Who remembers Sammy Hagar before being like, you know, Sammy Hagar is now just a punchline for, you know, music, you know, musicos, unless you are into very, very sort of conscious sort of rock of this style. It's like, it's fine, but you know, this is sort of the two peaks of which, you know, heavy metal is at as a genre. It's like, in your left corner you have this ultra polished thing of a band on their second guitarist, you know, making, you know, a guitarist, by the way, who's appeared on like the biggest album of the decade, in obviously Michael Jackson's Thriller. And then on the other hand you have these sort of like spotty, you know, it's weird to think, you know, Metallica are making this in their sort of like early to mid 20s. It still feels like the, you know, even for Master of Puppets, which obviously is 2 years later, it still seems remarkably polished and sort of remarkably, you know, mature for these guys who are still like basically, you know, still recording demos in like their garage.
Yeah, this feels like the completion of like the idea of Metallica. This definitely feels like here is the height of the promise that this band has.
Yeah, because basically from this period, Metallica have never gone back and done a record like Master of Puppets. They've kind of tried to, and like basically the last sort of like 2-3, I mean, certainly since Death Magnetic, Metallica have basically trying to get back to this sort of, you know, Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning-esque sound. But it's like, yeah, that would require Metallica to get out of their purpose-built studio complex and go back into the garage and, you know, do, dare to sort of like basically jam and do stuff. When you're easy to do when you're like up and coming. It's when you're an established act. This becomes difficult, and basically most of the rest of the 1980s, for obvious reasons we'll get into, and sort of most of the 1990s what was spent sort of like doing, kind of evolving in directions past this sound, and now it's sort of like modern Metallica are like very much, oh that was actually really cool, let's just try and do that again. Basically gone through like the backstory of this record. It's like there's basically just get into it. The one thing I will say is that is the I mean, do you have anything to sort of say about like, or anything you found about the history of the record prior to release, sort of?
I mean, not really. I just kind of come from a weird place where, like, it took me forever to get into, like, the people who are actually into the band. I just really liked music for a while. I guess it's just because my ADHD really hits me with, like, people's names and like, dates and all of that, and it all gets jumbled for a little bit. So it's just, like, Metallica has always been, like, these godlike creatures who have existed, and they've just occasionally blessed us with music.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, Napster came along, and then they made this deal where they would strike back against the peasants who, have smited them, but then they became human. Yeah. And they became very human with some kind of monster and Saint Anger. And that was the deal that was made at that point, where we realized how much these are human beings. And again, they were so big, they were so influential that you didn't need a Metallica album. They're, even in like the Bible Belt or, other places like that, you couldn't go anywhere where you wouldn't be able to find a radio station where, can I have some Metallica? Yes, you may have some Metallica. And if you wait until the later nights, can I have like the longer Metallica, like the Songmaster of Puppets? Yes, we can do that right now. It'll be the one song before we have to go to break, but abso-damn-lutely we're going to play it for you. That is just how far they got and how big they got, and especially with this album, because, I mean, you can find people who criticize it. Like, there's that one guy who wrote, the book on rock things, who gave it a B- in his
Rob Christo,
2000. Yeah.
Which is Christo is a very strange guy when it comes to metal, because like Christo likes a lot of like some metal, and then it's like, Rob Christo, this is fine, Rob Christo. Also, like, listen to all of this like early 90s hip hop. It's the fucking best thing I made. And he's like, is this extremely white guy from like, Robert Christo is a fantastic music critic. I feel he is obviously, he is now 83 and probably like one of the last like music critics writing consistently and in high quality on like, music. I mean, in this day and age where anybody can switch on a camera and be anyone can do a podcast to be a music critic. It's very easy to be a critic, to be a professional. A critic, to write consistently on music for the period that, Christo has been writing. Christo, I don't think has ever particularly liked metal. Like, bless him, I think he's tried, but I don't think he ever really, particularly likes, a lot of heavy metal. I don't think anything on his list he's particularly, it's fair enough, he's sort of, it's pretty. This is a quote from Christo. He described heavy metal as a symphonic bombast without the intelligence and complexity, although there's a lot of virtuosity. It's fair enough. It's not like he dislikes Metallica. He likes Megadeth. He's like, no, I just don't like metal. It's like, fair enough. there's a lot of it. I don't know, if you can listen to like some, very experimental metal and find it interesting. But that's how critics are. And you're going to find any with very few exceptions. Me talking about criticism now rather than Metallica. This is sort of like you have to occasionally you have to look at a sacred cow and go, something like Citizen Kane or something, and you have to go, okay, but this is still this is no particular work can be without flaws, just as no particular work can be without something to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in my mind, Master of Puppets is at that level of like, the video game Chrono Trigger, where it was just like, this is like one of the top levels of what we do, of what, this kind of stuff could do. I mean, I think, you could even put like my thing with metal is that it gets repetitive and, but like that doesn't affect Master of Puppets, even though it has a specific focus and it goes to that well many times, but it doesn't have that. Like, you could argue like most of the songs sound the same, except they have slightly different instruments and how they introduce, how the intro goes, and then once they start going it's there is that that little then it suddenly becomes the same song. But that never crossed my mind when I was listening to it. Like, it's infinitely listenable and everything is just different enough that, and it's focused enough. These are clearly about something, even if they are like shallow and I mean, not like super deep. Like, it is the right way of being a moody teenager who realizes the entire world sucks, because this is like, the church sucks, the military sucks, your country sucks, whatever else, and it's done in a way that is not, like whiny or, some sort of that, because I can be that person a lot, and but when Metallica does it, it is perfectly, they're, kind of righteous in that way, and regardless of who they really are as people. But when they do it like, Master of Puppets, like S tier album stuff, it's like, you listen and, this is, they command it. They don't like, they're not trying to force it.
There are, for my money, we'll obviously get into my general views on like this as a record. I think this is part of a vanishingly small tribe of records that I would describe as, there is not a single note missed. There is not a single note you can add or take away from Master of Puppets that I think would improve the record in a way, in any notable way. And I think that really is an album, sort of like, you probably are talking, off the top of my head, Talking Heads' Remaining Light, which is a perfect record. Kate Bush's Hounds of Love, perfect record. Possibly one or two of the Cure's albums of the 1980s. Possibly the Smiths Meet His Murder. This is in a very, very rarefied air that I think you can possibly Iron Maiden's Power Slave, where it's just like, you cannot like take anything, you cannot take away any element of this album and improve it. You can't add anything and improve it. This is as perfect as a heavy metal album can get.
And I would throw like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon in there.
Yeah. Oh, from the 1980s.
If I thought about it, there were
from the 80s.
I'm sure. Okay, from the 80s. Got it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's other great records. You start listing. Off. We were here all day, and the albums I think are flawless. Definitely Dark Side of the Moon. But I don't think anything that Pink Floyd did subsequently, with the possible exception of Wish You Were Here, sort of like is on that level. This is just like you can the only thing you could really do with this album is go in a different direction from it now, because you basically you have perfected what you're trying to do on this record. I say this, and there's like a massive box set of like Master of Puppets of like where it's just like the bells and whistles edition, where it's like, here, have like everything that like we said we ate in the studio as like an itemized list or some crap like that.
Yeah, and maybe different versions of Orion with different solos or something like that.
Oh yeah. But that's getting into sort of really sort of completist stuff, like how many takes of like a Rolling Stone, or how many takes of like Kirk doing the solo on Master of Puppets do you need to go, I think this is not going to get better. It's fair enough. I mean, this is a band in basically, even before we get into talking individual tracks, this is a band in their imperial phase, and basically there is nothing you can do with this record. We could be sitting here for like 2 hours and talk about Master of Puppets more, but why it works. But I think the fact is it works because it's Master of Puppets. Because it works because Master of Puppets, because it works. Right. Shall we begin with? Well, let's begin with the cover, because the cover is like one of the greatest heavy metal album covers of all time. It's just like, it's basically the whole. Ride the Lightning is a great album cover. I don't think, to be honest, Metallica have never really struggled to make iconic album covers. Even when you got the Black Album, which is basically, what's on the Black Album cover, sort of like vaguely distinguishable stuff. And then you get the cover of Master of Puppets,
How much
and
more
it's
black can it be?
None blacker. And then you get Master of Puppets, and it's like, it's just fucking perfect. It's like, it's that idea of the marionette sort of like control. There's probably a term for it, but it's the controls of the thing for the marionette, and the power, the hands in sort of like the thing, and the idea of war, which obviously comes into disposable heroes, and it's just it's immediately replicatable in like, I mean, I've seen T-shirts with this. I've seen your typical heavy metal guys with a big version of this on the back of a jacket. It's just it's iconic in a way that's really difficult to sort of describe why it's iconic, other than it's just a really powerful like representation of what's on the record.
It's like everything else in the album, it hits what it's about exactly right.
Yeah.
The only problem for me is the hands and that Goatsy exists.
I'm
sure I am not the first person.
Do not
to connect
Google
those
that.
two.
Do not Google that.
Do not. If you do not know, do not go and find.
No.
So.
It's a very it's very much.
There is somebody who has thought of that and who has done that parody album cover. It's the internet. They have done it.
Yeah, it will exist. Do not Google it. It's fair enough. It's a very it's also, again, which also I think something that I feel sort of really goes by the wayside these days. It's all physical media. That's a painting. That is a painting that was sold a few years ago, which I think was basically, I went for a 20,000 thing, and it's done by the same guy who did, I think he did like a couple of album covers for like Anthrax and other bands, but it is just a really cool like image, and you sort of have a lot of the album's themes of control and power and ideas sort of going on, and who is pulling our strings. We'll get to that shortly. Also, the sort of the interior sort of images of the band also like kind of indicate the journey that Metallica have been on, because it's like, hey, the whole sensibility of like, hey, the last time we saw these guys on an album, like in interior back cover, whatever, they were sort of spotty looking. So now look at them; they're actually like this really cool bunch of people. Yeah, it's like, you know, there's also a picture of them with just like booze. They've got lots of booze in their hands. They've got so much, you know. They're basically like, hey, yeah.
Although apparently they managed to stay sober for recording days.
Yes,
that was the deal they made.
Yeah,
I don't know how true that is, but
yeah, it's sort of like, you know, again, we're condemning people from like 40 years ago, but they're like the image that sort of I feel typifies like where Metallica are is that so there's obviously like a picture of each of the band members, and then underneath there's obviously the band playing, and then there is just this sea of people. Like, I'm assuming they're playing in some sort of stadium or something, and that's sort of like, hey, this is how far we've come as a group. You know, that we are now playing these huge sort of arenas, and obviously this is sort of the direction that Metallica would continue to go on, basically. Which ironically is apparently the Day on the Green gig, which is obviously the same where a lot of the really cool Cliff Burton playing bass videos come from. So let's begin with the actual contents of the album. Track number 1, Battery, and it's that old Metallica sort of setup of, acoustic guitar, and then, you know, into the rest of the album.
Yes.
It's a very cool
That's
riff.
It's going to be quite a lot of songs on this.
Yeah, it's that do-do-do-do, and then obviously then you get the electric going.
It feels like a western.
It is a very, I mean, obviously this is the band that used like Morricone's, you know, the theme for the, you know, obviously Ecstasy of God. So I think there is like a little bit of a Morricone-esque sort of like, you know, sensibility, and there's like so many covers of this. Is unsurprisingly, it's just like, yeah, there's just like you know, you can name most heavy metal bands and they've probably done a cover of this. There's a really weird a cappella version by band Van Canto, which sort of like does it sounds very good, but it's sort of got, you know, various vocalists sort of, you know, obviously doing this a cappella, and it works quite well. This kind of basically sets up the key theme of the thing. It's, you know, the power, the sort of slightly the themes of insanity and power. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like,
you know, the need to be aggressive.
Yeah, there's like, which kind of basically tail ends nicely with the other track, which obviously we'll get to, which bookends the album. You know, which is obviously Damage Inc., which is, you know, it's a very fast, it's a very, very angry, you know, song. It basically goes, you know, hey, do you remember Fight Fire with Fire from like Ride the Lightning? And that was like really good, but it was like very, you know, said it was sort of like, and there's like, you know, James Hetfield's sort of voice trying to get to the top of his range. Yeah, watch this. Yeah, it's like. And then obviously the solos are just, you know, ridiculous, and, you know, everything's going about 200 miles an hour, and, you know, it's you know, the whole sensibility of, you know, the very, very fast thrash, very, very fast thrash riff. The kind of the best version of this, ironically, I think, is there's a version where they had Dave Lombardo of Slayer, because I think Lars was ill or something, and just watching like all three of the current members of Metallica just basically like almost sort of wake up and it's like, oh, this is what it goes like when we have a drummer who's you know really who's able to play at that speed. You know, it's a great opener to the album. It's a really good, you know, opener to the album, and, you know, it's sort of basically, it's that energy that really sort of sustains the record for the rest of its length.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there is something pushing me to be this insane, and I can't destroy it, and Now let's go on and figure out what is pushing you to be this insane.
Yeah, it's like Metallica do like writing these songs, obviously to go to, push, especially through the boundaries, Lunacy's Family Colors of the Battery. Like, generally, it's like, there's a lot of, like, almost one or two an album, like, where they go, our fans are fucking insane. It's like, our fans are throwing themselves around in the mosh pit and, committing violence against each other. And, also, this song was just apparently just anti-hair metal. It's like, the family that they refer to is the family of, like, other people into thrash metal. It's like, rather than these sort of, these posers, man, who are listening, they spend 20 minutes, but we'll just get drunk in that 20 minutes, man.
Like the Van Halen family?
Like the Van Halen family, hey, there's like 2, 3, maybe 4 Van Halens. It's fast, it's angry, it's sort of like, basically, the Battery, by the way, is Battery Street in San Francisco, so that's kind of like again, a reference I was not aware of before actually researching for this episode. And then obviously we get the title track, and I think like everything you need to know about Metallica is that dun 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 dun. That is just one of. It's just one of
like that's gonna be in your head until the day you die.
It will. Like sometimes my brain just goes. It's like, okay, right. This is like an album where like this is the quality of like an anthemic band is like you get these like these riffs, you get these sort of elements of songs like listen in your head, and it's like hey, the do 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 the song that the bridge from like Mars Puppet has been stuck in my head for about the last 4 days. It's the big long Metallica song which sort of like appears. This is like the Metallica song. I don't think they've played this any song longer, more than this. I as far as I'm aware, this is like Metallica played this live like over 2,000-3,000 times, which okay for 40 years it's like but they're basically that's every single gig. It's just like it's fast and it's angry and it's and then you get the sort of this is basically the obviously the title tracks on Metallica albums always tend to be here's the concept for the album. Ride the Lightning is about the electric chair. Injustice for All is about the corruption of the justice system. And is 9.5 minutes long, and this indicates like what kind of happened with and Justice for All is everything just got too long. It got too long, and it got sort of like overly progressive, and there's this old quote from Kirk Hammett who said, by like minute 7 or 8 of like and Justice for All, people were dozing. I challenge anyone to like manage to fall asleep during Master of Puppets. It's I mean, I think the only other thing you could argue is Enter Sandman, and that's just mostly because Enter Sandman is at every sporting event. It has become like ubiquitous in a way I don't think like any other rock song apart from like Seven Nation Army has ever like become. It's just like, hey, you want something to like get you into the mood. It's dun do 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 dun do dun do do. Great. Well done, Metallica. We might eventually get to like the Black Album, which I have problems with. The sort of like if you couldn't tell, I kind of like the I like and I've got to say, hand on heart, I like Load and Reload. I will even go to bat for Saint Anger at points. I even kind of like Lulu, but it's like where Metallica are at their strongest is when they do stuff like this. Basically when they do long form sort of thrash metal sort of musical storytelling thing. It's very easy to sort of go, oh well, the Black Album sold this many copies. It's like, yes, but it's commercial. And I now sound like some sort of like guy you'd probably find in like a rock pub and sort of going, I remember when music was cool, man. I remember when bands didn't sell out for like, I don't know, a commercial or something, man. I've got some, that voice really does me. Master of Puppets is just the kind of the the whole sort of sense of it takes you on a journey, and that journey is about addiction and bad things happening to you when you become a puppet to your addiction. Yeah, the problem I have, and I think we mentioned this, Joe, before, obviously we recorded this, is Metallica are a great band. Subtlety in songwriting is not really their thing.
Yeah, the problem is with me being limited is I'm more of an analytical guy as far as lyrics. I'm not, like, if you ask me to, like, describe synth lines, which, are there any here? No, I could probably describe it because I was more of an electric, trained person, and I had piano lessons for whatever good that would do. But not guitars. My drum, I can't keep 4/4 time. So
neither can Lars, don't worry.
That tells you how good I was a drummer.
I'm gonna stop with
although
the last
really that it's just anybody who's tried to take this on in Rock Band will tell you, like, all the key chains and all of that are insane. It is just like you have to keep your head in the game if you want to, like, understand and, like, play this song, because like, it goes fast, it goes slow, it suddenly stops, and then it keeps going back at that steady rate until it switches again. There you go. Goodbye.
I am a sort of so-so guitarist. This is just like the Mount Everest, obviously. And I listen to a lot of, like, long, noodly progressive rock. It's just this sort of goes everywhere. You've got obviously they've done the opening riff, and then you've got like what I would advise, if you ever want to sort of work, see how good of a guitarist James Hetfield is, because he never gets his fucking due, is listen to just the Master of Puppets isolated guitars, which are all him apart from the soloing, where he is just locked down that riff for like locked down the picking for like 8 minutes of just continual, considering that's like he does this live like twice, 3 times a week, and just like the sensibility of this is a guy who has basically played these riffs for like 40 years. He's still that locked down on them. He's kind of impressive, and something you never hear about. And obviously you've got Cliff Burton's bass in the back as well, that also gives it that sort of very, again, listen to Cliff Burton's isolated bass tracks for Master of Puppets. It's like, because he's again playing for like 7 or 8 minutes, just continuously like going through these phrases. This is like, again, one of the great like heavy metal tracks. It's like it's so easy to sort of go, there must be countless bands or countless guitarists who've been inspired to pick up a guitar by Master of Puppets. It's like, my favorite bit of the album might be the bridge, and then the solo on Master of Puppets, is that because it goes from that very clean, that very do 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 do, this sort of dynamic that Metallica seem to have, where they go from very quiet, very very almost classical sort of stuff to this chun 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 chun, the master where that sort of like anger and musical storytelling, as I said, and obviously the solo is just ridiculous. It's like it's one of those guitar solos that you sort of like you probably like you start playing that in a Guitar Center or whatever exists these days, because I don't think Guitar Centers probably exist anymore. You probably get, unless you are playing this like spot on, you are probably finding yourself outside very quickly.
Yeah, and no Stairway to Heaven either.
No,
from the Wayne's World joke.
It's just, and then obviously it's really just good. Thing, and then obviously you just go the and it sort of pulls you back in. It's sort of like there is no escape to the cycle of addiction, and all you're left with at the end is Metallica laughing at you, because you've fallen prey to sort of like the control of stuff, and you bought a CD from them anyway. Really just angry music. Yeah. But the songwriting is like hey, we've managed to like rhyme that and habitat, and I will occupy, I'll help you die. Sort of, it's there is a sort of sensibility to it. Metallica have some good lyrics. Like, I'm not knocking them on this, and I think I think a lot of people come to Metallica for the music element rather than so much the ability to like write a good lyric, and it's like. But they get it in a sort of sensibility where it's still kind of anthemic, and you can still sort of, sing along. You could sing or yell along to this, and it's like, hey, that's cool too.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of
and
feeling.
like Master of Puppets is like at least leagues better than the lyrics to Enter Sandman.
Oh dear. Yes.
I mean, it's only because when you do lyric analysis, your brain has to. Like, Enter Sandman is pretty much an untouchable song, but if you wanted to do it, like, some of those aren't great.
Yeah.
But like but I am a peasant, so
we're after never let you hear. And that's when the problem is with Master Puppets is James just starts using the word yeah, and so, as punctuation. It does not get better from there. Track numero 2, the thing that should not be. Hey, guess what, kids? It's Cthulhu time again.
It's Cthulhu time, and it's just another thing where I have to say I'm not really big into Cthulhu because it's not. I do not believe there's a point where we can be driven so insane that we can't understand it. The real horror is what we do to the things we understand that would rip us apart if we fully acknowledge them, and we just don't do, which is what this world is doing right now, and I'm very tired of it. And I would like people to have some acknowledgement and take some responsibility, because that's the real horror that is happening right now.
Yeah, yes.
But
hey, you can certainly go after Howard Philip Lovecraft for a lot of things.
Yes.
We're not getting into the
cat name.
The cat name the cat name being one of them. Do not Google that. But the thing that should not be is, I think, probably the most underrated track on this album, because it's just like, it's a mood, and you've got that very down tuned, I think in this Metallica down tuned to like something like a C or a, I haven't played guitar in ages, and I probably should. But they are down tuned in this sort of very murky mood sort of sensibility, and these lyrics about something unsettling, and this madness of sort of this sensibility of the sort of the sensibility of something out there. And like, I think Metallica do like this sort of like doing these songs which are like hey, the drugs and war and religion are bad, but also there's this big tentacle octopus lad, and he's gonna be like, if you spell his name correctly, you will summon him. And we did this 9-minute song on the Art album about him, so we're doing another one. The most amusing thing is, I think, they paraphrase obviously the best thing on this is the Kirk Hammett's guitar solo, which is just this wild, crazy sort of like sort of noise. This sort of this is probably like it's such an underrated track and it's sort of this sensibility of just genuinely what is this, and I don't think it gets played. Yeah,
it tries to get another mood instead of like being enraged. It is like dread. It is a state of dread, and the other ones are just like
something you
malicious.
Can understand.
Yeah.
But again,
they are. The rest of them like have a certain force where something is attacking you. This is not attacking you. This is taking you over.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's the sort of like this sensibility of, the power comes in, power and control comes in many things, and it's like, here is this thing that is like not understandable by human forces, and has enslaved like these people in this sort of watery area, this coastal area, and this is like I that's not even in the song, that's just the mood it creates. It's like this sort of sensibility of just it's like Call of Cthulhu, which I think is one of probably the most underrated Metallica songs. I think this just does a really good, sensibility of this really good like imagery from just like a few guitar notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I can take a song about Cthulhu more than I can take a story, because like every single story about Cthulhu mythos feels like it's going to the same place, and like
that was the that'd be the last thing he wrote. After that, he went crazy and started doodling this octopus thing on the wall, and then he killed himself.
Or that's what the people who do come out safely, they come home and then something in the person they went with did not come out untouched, and then they're just like, I am a tentacle monster now, and that kind of thing.
That's the and then good old Guillaume del Toro goes, no, this time I will make Mountains of Madness, and then he goes and does something else. Like the Cthulhu mythos is great, but it's much better when it's not being done by a man who sort of called his cat that, and basically it's more interesting when it's like a hint of something than going, Blur, who is 200-foot tall tentacle lad, which it kind of then just becomes very silly and sort of and that's where Metallica tend to keep like Cthulhu. He's sort of like ominously looming in their music rather than going, hello, I'm Cthulhu. This is also probably the best lyrics on the entire album, I'm going to be frank. It's this sort of the sensibility of like this sort of like allusions to when Metallica do a song based on something, it sort of like becomes either very oblique, like something like One, where it's just like, here are direct quotes from Johnny Got His Gun, a film that Metallica owned for a period because they couldn't be bothered, because they had so much money they could circumnavigate copyright by owning the film. Or it just becomes what I would recall. I think when we were talking briefly about Iron Maiden, it becomes what I would politely call book report metal. Where it's sort of like, here is a story about a thing, and this is he's this thing, and I think Metallica managed to keep like the sort of the sensibility of, in this case, the Lovecraftian mythos, because Metallica just seemed to like H.P. Lovecraft being guys who collect comic books after all, and it's fine. It's a very it's a cool sort of, but it is a very teenage thing of saying, hey, there's this gibbering monster. It's like it's like writing songs about your D&D character sort of level of nerdy, which is weird to think of Metallica as nerds.
Their Cthulhu parts are the random nerdy part, but it's still like literary, so it's not like too far.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. Speaking of literary, guess what the next song...
I am like... Oh, go ahead.
Speaking of literary, guess what the next song, Welcome Home Sanitarium, is about? It is about beloved American novel, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yes. Yeah. Again, really good, well-written song, and, the really... I think this is like... Metallica, again, Metallica have for a band that are like, surprisingly, like, they have a formula, and on this album, it basically follows, with one exception, the formula of, Ride the Lightning. It's fast opening song with an acoustic piece, long sort of like, song which is the title track, and now this is the ballad. This is the ballad that sort of like appears on the record. This is like the track number 4. It's a ballad. The ballad is going. This is like Metallica slowing down a little bit and going here is like something more profound and more. We're gonna sort of, we're not gonna chug along at like 200 BPM. This is gonna be, quiet and sort of very contemplative sort of vibe.
It feels like it's the one that gets forgotten when you talk about this stuff, because the Cthulhu song, it's like, oh yeah, this is where Metallica gets into Cthulhu, but this is where it's a person who is in a sanitarium who shouldn't be there, and they are just making him more insane, but it's more isolation than anger. It's just like, it's, there are these doctors who are doing stuff on him to make him better that's making him worse, but there's some anger to it, obviously, but it's not like, that's not the main drive. It's just this, sense of inevitability.
Yeah, it's just, the sensibility of it is, that, the how do I word this sort of like, this fear of the obviously the stuff before the bridge, which obviously fear of living on, natives getting breathless, now mutiny in the air, got some death to do. It's like, how, man? That's literally like wandering of the cuckoo's nest. But it's otherwise it's sort of like this sort of thing that Metallica always seem very reluctant to talk about, and certainly I think, this sensibility that I think really came up to. I'm gonna stop saying sensibility. This vibe that sort of like up until, Saint Anger, which was the big angry, okay, maybe we have some issues album and we need to all see therapists. Metallica always seem very reluctant to sort of look at, mental, health. It's like they have for a band who are like, very macho and very sort of like, hey, we're gonna like, we're gonna do these songs about, stuff. We're fine. The alcohol and all the drugs, those are just normal things that rock bands do. And, it's like, no, you all have like severe. James, you have severe like, stuff going on. It's like, and obviously this sort of like, this sort of this goes along with the same thing, which is Fade to Black, a song that full on has saved people from like, killing themselves. This is Metallica again going, sort of shining the light into the sort of corner and going, this is the power comes in many forms, and one of the forms of power is the power that it is this power over people who are are trapped in the sanitariums, or or trapped by their poor mental health.
Yeah, and that can be sort of problematic, because I don't want to ever say it's not there, but like things like this like keep people off from seeking help for mental health. And that's not to say that the system is great, or a lot of psychological people haven't been really fucked, especially that guy who did experiments with the wire mom and the monkeys. Like they've been disturbed. Like there are reasons this gets that, but a lot of this gets to like, don't ever seek help for this because you'll just be made worse or something like that.
Yeah, is that very macho?
Which is not the end goal, and it's just upsetting that there's still just enough of this where it's just like, we need to find a place to put someone, and we just leave them there because there's no hope, and that's just kind of what mental health treatment was, and to some points is, and I don't want to say everything has gone away. I mean, we haven't perfected anything, because the human mind can go so many places, but but it is what it is, and it's another way of expressing how to take control, because it's just like husbands who didn't want to deal with their wives anymore, they just threw them in sanitariums.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't even have to do anything wrong. They just gave them certain medications that would just, leave them knocked out and leave them whatever.
Yeah. And there's but again, it's like, but the musicianship on this again is just absolutely fantastic. That sort of last sort of like 2 minutes, which is just like them, basically the members of the band, just James and Kurt just trading off riffs, and that sort of like the solos on this as well. The bizarre fact about this, apparently Rivers Cuomo of Weezer, because of course he would wind his way into this episode, basically said he ripped this off of the Sweater song from Weezer's first album. Question mark. Yeah.
Yes, that's what they were talking about, destroying sweaters.
Yeah. This is one of Kirk's 5 tracks on it. Yeah, this is the sort of thing, like, I think this is where, particularly on Master of Puppets, I think it's when Kurt really becomes, like, the third songwriter in the band. Like, he's done, like, a couple of tracks on, ironically, it's all the really good ones, apart from Escape, because nobody likes Escape. Does anyone remember Escape? No. It's like, we have to write a single quickly. But this is like one of Kirk's 5 tracks, and the next 3 tracks, basically from Master of Puppets to Disposable Heroes, is all written by Kirk. Or is partly written by Kirk. Incidentally, because obviously we have to talk about Dave Mustaine briefly, it's contractually obligated. Apparently there is nothing written on this by Dave Mustaine, but Dave does his usual thing of going, but I wrote this riff, or this sounds like a riff that I maybe came up with, and it's like, yes, Kurt, yes, Dave, of course you did.
Yes, Dave.
Hello,
Dave. It's Dave again.
Hello, me. We have to do that every time as well. What's particularly bizarre is there's a riff from Anti-Warhol by David Bowie, which is just apparently just in Master of Puppets, which I've never heard before, but now I can't unhear, and it's like, yeah, that's very strange, and won't be the only time that David Bowie is sort of vaguely mentioned on this album. Very peculiar connection. This is the halfway mark. Let's talk about Disposable Heroes, which is the second longest track on the album, and is another like 8-minute thing. This is the one I feel doesn't really get people talking about, because it's like,
it puts people in a in a spot, because obviously the people who play Enter Sandman at football games and they're all America, rah rah rah, and then they get to Disposable Heroes and wait, this is about how like the military-industrial complex sucks ass, and they just want cannon fodder.
Yeah.
And they want obedient little dogs who will die for them.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff. And this is very a post-Vietnam thing where where America lost, and they got to see just what was the cost of this, because it's just like you can talk about like Iraq and that being just a waste of life, but like the numbers in Vietnam were just extreme for what they were doing, and not even knowing why they were doing it except some vague thing against communism. And,
you've got to remember that's obviously the generation of, but like the immediate cohort, probably part of the same generation as Metallica. It's like, you've got people 5, 10, 15 years older than the guys who are Metallica coming back or not coming back, as the case may be, from that. And I feel a lot of the sort of like the 80s anti-war sort of in music kind of like I don't think has ever been replicated since. Obviously you get sort of stuff like American Idiot, and you get general sort of anti establishment views of it, but criticism directly of the military in the US now seems to be a very should we say a touchy subject.
Proposal. And I say that, and I have a brother who is in the military, so I understand it. I don't hate the player, I hate the game, and
indeed
it is a whole lot of, and especially now, it's just like what we do seems to be helpful for the people who are friends of politicians, and that's what that is the implementation of the American war machine, and to that extent, and it doesn't feel like we do much else besides like a few strikes on a few select people, but it just other than that, it's keeping a lot of control. But I am not involved in any of this, and there are certain things I know and I don't know, and there are people who in the military who will tell you they know certain things that it's not solely this, but it just feels like it, because this is like it is, the machine has been built to be too big that you cannot
and too efficient
oppose it.
And the thing is, this
I wouldn't
is
say efficient.
No, it's like, this is Metallica. I don't think Metallica have shown anger like this. Like, the particularly the opening lyrics of this are like, bodies fill the fields like the angry heroes, and no one to show shoulder now, no one to pretend. It's like, I wonder what this could be about. Is this about Vietnam? The sort of there's that statistic, and I can't remember if it's from the book Dispatches or something else. It's like, the average the average age of people who died in Vietnam was something like 19 to 20. It's just like, it's the sensibility, but and there's this lyric, and I said, I think this must be one of the best things James Hetfield has ever written, like, which is 21 Only Son, Buddy Son as well. That's whole character portrait in miniature. This sort of like, another victim, another sort of family, destroyed by the whole American military industrial complex. And then you get that sort of drill sergeant, you will do what I say, back to the front. That sort of like very, what's the character from that sort of sensibility is the character from Full Metal Jacket. I'd honestly be interested to see whether they were watching films like that when they. But the guitar work is absolutely. I think this is actually the fastest track on the album, because there's a that sort of almost ticking sort of machinery underneath all of this. It's really angry and really. I don't think Metallica have ever dissuaded from politics, but it's unusually political for them, and it's sort of like the first sensibility of these power structures are not inherently evil, as a thought.
And I am not, like, I am like mentally incapable of like joining an army, because it's just like you have to have somebody. I do not react well to this kind of you will do what I say, you will do how I say it, and if you don't, I will destroy you until you become this person, because that's like, I am a mole person who has mostly lived a very solitary lifestyle until suddenly I have a wife and a kid. And I like, my sense of self is way too set to be able to be this person.
Yeah, and I think that's quite something that the sensibilities of a 40-year-old heavy metal album sort of haven't really changed. The America that sort of like of Master of Puppets is sort of like which is Reagan's America, hasn't really ever gone away. It's sort of like you couldn't make Master of Puppets these days because people go, that's Master of Puppets by Metallica, what are you doing? There's an album by Machine Head, which is called Blackening, which is obviously, again, this sort of, this very intelligent, this very thrash metal. The opening track of it is called Clenching the Fist of Dissent, and it's sort of like, it is almost like, hey, do you know, Disposable Heroes? Yeah, nothing's changed. This is like the Iraq War version of, you know, and it's like 12 minutes long, and it's just the most, you know, again, just tremendously like righteous anger sort of sensibility to it. Which is all, I would always say the Blackening is sort of like the answer to Master of Puppets in terms of like here is like a thematic, you know, 360 of what it's like to be in America in in the early 2000s. Ironically, Machine Head would actually appear on a covers album of Master of Puppets and do, you know, Battery. So, you know, hey, you know, that's kind of similar element. From the evil controlling military to the evil controlling religion now, as we go to Leopard Messiah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is like
it's another really self-evident song.
This is where I feel like, you know, it was very, very easy and very, very, you know, simple to sort of, you know, basically go, televangelists are evil. You know, it's like basically Heavy Metal 101. Have you done a song about how televangelists are evil? Because Metallica and Iron Maiden and basically every other heavy metal band you can name, including Slayer, who basically went, hey, why don't we just turn this into a career and just mostly write all of our songs about how religion is evil? You know,
yes.
Yeah. This is a very good musical. Compared to like how nuanced Disposable Heroes is, this is where the songwriting, the lyricism does become a little bit heavy-handed. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know,
it's kind of hard not to be when you get into this mode.
It is. It's like, you know, it's very easy, you know, particularly considering, like, obviously, you know, James Hetfield's mother was a Christian Scientist and died basically because of the, you know, the stringent belief. You know, you can start to understand why James doesn't like organized religion. It's like, yeah, this is something that would sort of obviously come back in a slightly more nuanced form on, you know, obviously the Load and Reload. But, you know, there is almost like a really, it's almost cartoony sort of sensibility of the, you know, I mean, I actually forgot when we talked about, like, oh yeah, you know, not to mention Phil Collins' Jesus He Loves Me, which is also like, again, just absolutely on the button, just sort of, you know, these people are are two-faced, you know, creeps who will basically take your money and line their own pocket, which is basically what Leopard Messiah is about. You know, it's like... And
then Peter Gabriel does the soundtrack to Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah, yes, the fact that, another thing that the Roman Catholics didn't like. But it is sort of like...
They don't like anything.
No. But it sort of does have some, like, really smart, like, very, very, you know, knowing sort of things. You know, send me money, send me green heaven, will you make a contribution to get us a better scene. And obviously then the Bowie reference, which is Leopard Messiah, which is a literal lyric lifted from Ziggy Stardust, the title track on Ziggy Stardust. But, you know, it's like, it's a dun 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 dun. Yeah, good riff, good, you know, really good thing. Again, it's like I'm not gonna say any of these tracks are bad because they're like, you know, the songwriting on this is so like tight that we are really really splitting hairs, I think, on this.
Yeah, it's really splitting hairs, but as a Lutheran who like criticizes Catholicism on the regular, just it's so easy to do because they make it so easy. Like, the only thing the Catholics like is not actually doing what they preach to do.
Yeah, it's like, and there's so many of the songs like which you can just write about, like the heavy metal is full of just songs of going, this is two-faced and these people are not good. Yeah. It's the one track I sort of like. If you said obviously, you know, Welcome Home Sanitary is the track you sort of like tend to go, oh right, that's there too. Levin Messiah is the track I go, oh, that's between. there's a sort of 6-minute period between like, Disposable Heroes and Orion, which is this song, and this song is fine. It just flows very nicely into between the 3 tracks. It's like, right, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna like talk about the master of puppets and the military industrial complex, you also have to get into religion.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand.
They're always they're interconnected on the puppet strings, if you will.
Indeed. And then we arrive at my favourite track on the album. Holy shit, what can you say about Orion? Orion is again this sort of like, this sort of Metallica's instrumentals, I think, are really where you sort of see the quality of Metallica as a band, where it's sort of like, it's, what do Metallica do without lyrics? They do this, and it's sort of, again, this is almost like, Call of Cthulhu is a great piece of music. Call of Cthulhu is like one of my favourite Metallica songs. This is my favourite Metallica song of all time.
Okay.
Because it's sort of like,
yeah. It's. I am just not a guitar person. My only thing is I am not a guitar person. So I'm like, that's really pretty, and I understand how like difficult it is to harmonize like this, and it's. But there, I mean, my brain can only like talk about it or like. Process it so much. I mean, like, it's great. It's absolutely great, but you're probably going to be going all the way with this because, like, I really don't have anything to say.
Yeah. Oh no, completely. This is kind of like, obviously we have to kind of talk about Cliff Burton, because obviously the shadow hanging over this record is about sort of like 6-7 months after they released this. Obviously, Metallica were going through Sweden, and the bus overturned, and Cliff died. That shadow has hung over Metallica since like that point, and I don't think Metallica have ever. And I don't think to be fair to Metallica, I don't think you would ever want them to get that out of their system, because it defines the sort of particularly and Justice for All, which is like this whole sensibility, this whole, even more political, even more righteous anger at sort of things, and Metallica go into an even more progressive things, and you get, what is probably one of their sort of like final word in their instrumentals, which is To Live Is To Die, which is probably like the final bit of songwriting that Cliff did for the band. But this is sort of like, this is Cliff's masterpiece. This is just like, this is what you get when you get a guy who is classically trained in a heavy metal band, is you get something that sort of like almost takes sort of, all those classical music sort of things. And obviously, this has been reorchestrated by, Rodrigo and Gabriella. This has been, done by Apocalyptica, who are a band who are just entirely play, Metallica on cellos, and it works in a classical setting, and it works in almost like a Mexican sort of, dual guitar thing, because this is by far like the sensibility. This is like, there's this whole, we can get into like alternative histories, and we can get into sort of like what could have happened, or what could have happened if other scenarios had happened. The most bizarre of which is probably Lars would have been kicked out of Metallica, which is like, in 2026 is a very bizarre thing. It's easy to sort of go into write your own, oh, what if XYZ Metallica fan fiction, but this is what we're left with. We're left with this sort of this extremely proficient sort of sensibility of, this is what you can do with 4 guys in a room playing, playing the normal music instruments of a rock band. You can get this, this profoundly interesting, this profoundly sort of, different, almost progressive rocks, progressive metal, sort of thing, that doesn't sound like really anything else on the album, and the only thing that really connects it, the only connective tissue to the rest of the album is it's the same 4 people who play on the rest of the album. It takes it in this sort of really interesting, sort of directions. There's a bass solo on there, and obviously there's, some really clever, bits of music, and it sounds like almost sort of someone has taken some little known sort of 18th, 19th, there's something from the Baroque period, even sort of piece of classical music, and brought it forward into 1986 in some chilly studio in Copenhagen, and produced it again. It is the best thing Metallica have done. It's the best thing Metallica will ever do.
Okay.
Also, it's
I'm surprised it wasn't on the S&M album.
I'm genuinely surprised. They seem to have had a real reluctance to play it for obviously its connotations and its importance in the Metallica canon. Ironically, and leading on to something we'll talk on later in this year, it's also sampled on DJ Shadow's Introducing. Yeah.
And that's just going to be endless references to everything else.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of talk about the importance of Orion for the band, this is just a tiny little fact that James has Orion, as in like the actual notes of Orion's bridge, that sort of do 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 do, that bit where it's like really wow, the bit which there's obviously Cliff plays a bass solo on this, which is that sort of second sort of section. James Hetfield has part of Orion tattooed onto his arm, which is sort of indicates the sort of underlines, I think, the importance of this record, this track for the rest of the band, and
probably why he didn't want to mess with it.
Yeah,
it's Cliff.
It's Cliff.
I mean, even though the rest of the band did it, this is Cliff's big thing that we will remember him for.
Yeah, exactly. And then we sort of get, ironically, actually, we get Damage Incorporated, which opens with another piece, a quotation from another piece of classical music, which is actually via backwards sort of guitar, which is actually Bach's Comma Societat, which is like very esoteric. I can only think that would be Cliff playing that. Again, it's a reverse bass, so I must assume it must be Cliff. And then it's sort of back to the ferocity that we sort of like started the album on. The cycle has the cycle of power and inequality has not changed, and we're gonna go hit people. Violence begets more violence, and violence is power, and power controls us all. And Damage Inc. is great, but it's that it is just like relentless, the relentless sort of outward energy that sort of ends the record.
Yes. I mean, you thought you were gonna be able to think about this because you had Orion, and that's like, okay, you have emotional. You have emotionally processed it. Nope, we're back to this cycle. You're just gonna get punched again, and you're gonna keep getting punched, and it's gonna keep happening, and maybe sometimes you'll have a little break to feel sad about it.
Yeah, maybe someone will play a pretty bass solo. Anyway, but that's the sort of, and that is like barely 55 minutes. I mean, it's the. This is ironically the last album that Metallica would release with a runtime of under an hour, which sort of like, something going on there with like the 90s and albums just being ridiculously long,
just
and
being big and huge. Like you want people to buy the albums because they're these giant things, and it's not just the singles.
Yeah, it's like, hey, do you remember Load, where we literally couldn't like fit an entire song on it, so we had to do it on the CD? Do you remember that? Remember when we literally went, we've had to cut off the really cool jam at the end of this song, of the last song of the album, so we could fit it onto a standard CD? Yeah. Remember when we wrote like albums that were like 55 minutes long and literally didn't waste a note? No. No, that was back in the Cliff days. It's easy to sort of like speak superlatives about Master of Puppets. It's like it's very easy to sort of like go, but it's like the fact, this is the high tide mark of Metallica, I think. This is like, they've done good stuff since, but it's not been like a good full album. It's like, it's been, this is good and this is good and this is good, and the singles from this are fairly good, and, the first half of it, this are good, but this could be like one CD rather than two. Yeah, we remember Hardwired to Self-Destruct, that was too long. It's like, that was 2 hours, that was 2 discs for some godforsaken reason. And this is the other thing, Metallica are now 40 years after this, and, still trying to get back to this sort of halcyon days of this record. For whatever purpose, is it some sort of attempt to recapture one's misspent youth and sort of, when you're pushing 60 odd, or is it, is there something more emotive, or is it just that they felt, well, this was probably the best thing they've ever done, and they can only really, embellish it.
Mm-hmm. Like, I think at this point, like, once you, like, completely perfectly nail this, you just have to expand is all you can do, which is what they've been trying to do. And, they've succeeded at here and there and, at various levels. So, you just can't make it again, because otherwise you're just doing the sequel where you're doing the same thing again, but not as good. And that's most sequels.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you have made arguably, and certainly in my opinion, one of the best albums of the 80s. Not metal albums, not thrash metal albums, best 8 albums of the 80s as a decade, which you consider like what that is competing with. That is this is probably certainly also one of the best heavy metal albums just ever recorded. Bands sort of basically, seem to, this is almost like the pole star of like what it means to be a heavy metal band, right? You kind of have that. You have, Black Sabbath's Paranoid, you might have a couple of other records. This is sort of like, something that sort of, I don't think it changed music, but it almost set a mark and go, this is the new sort of like, this is what a heavy metal band can do.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's self-evident. If I have to nitpick anything, if I have to like, religion is an easy spot. It's just because I have to find something to talk about here. Because otherwise, it's just like, yep. Great album.
Otherwise, it's
one of the great ones. Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's 10 minutes of me just talking about like guitars and like going, and then we just go, it's Master of Puppets. I mean, that's the thing. At the end of the day, it's Master of Puppets. It's like it is like you could say Master of Puppets, and it immediately, in your head you've got like the riffs and the appearance of the album cover, and it's like, It is an album in incredibly rarefied air, as the sort of, and I would describe, and as I said, I'm going to repeat, I think it is a perfect album. Anyway,
I'm not going to argue with you.
I'm not going to argue.
I am only, talking about things to talk about things, because that is what I have to do.
That's what a podcast
is. I'm, doing for my 3 months of Patreon money. Or whatever.
Yes, if you would like to give Joe some Patreon money so Joe can talk about, lesser known anime series, which we also love to do, by the way. We like going and sort of like going, hey, do you remember this like one cool anime series from like 2003 that's now like on a £90?
Even if you don't, I'm going to talk about it anyway, because like this is what I have chosen to do with my life.
That's what we do.
And like there are 5 people who really like what I do, and this is why there are only 5 people, because I talk about this.
Yeah, that's fair enough. This is why we end up with a very strange like demographic of like heavy metal, of music fans and anime fans, and occasionally we go, hey, what about this this anime with music? Maybe we should do like Detroit Metal City at some point and bring them all together.
Well, there is one thing we're doing later this year that's gonna cross these interests.
I do believe that might be our next anniversary episode, Joe. What could it be?
Could it be Daft Punk and Discovery?
It is in just 9 days' time, because that's the sort of like, the sensibility we do. We are talking Daft Punk's Discovery, an album with an entire anime movie attached by the great Leiji Matsumoto.
It's said by the great, but I say this as somebody who Galaxy Express 3.9 is a part of my soul.
Yep.
Matsumoto likes putting on his name on a lot of things, and then you all do the rest of the work. He did that way earlier than we would like to admit, and that's a lot of what I hear about the anime with coupled with is like he gave them he allowed them to use the aesthetics, and then put his name on, and he has like a quote at the beginning, and then the rest is everybody else's work, and that's what I understand.
Yeah.
Interstellar.
Yeah.
555.
We'll get to Interstellar 555. As I said, it's in 9 days' time, so we will be back very shortly with another anniversary episode. We're not doing that bloody thing again, though. We have 2 episodes in one day. That was chaotic, and we did it. But anyway, we'll be talking about Discovery by Daft Punk, which celebrates 25 years. By the way, this episode, if you're under a rock and you're wondering, hey, why are you two talking about Metallica for like an hour 30? It's like, yeah, this Master of Puppets is 40. We're all aging horribly. Anyway, we'll talk about Discovery next time, and I will, it'll be maybe we'll talk about some anime and some music at the same time in an unprecedented, move for the Thom and Joe show.
A crossover
between ourselves and ourselves, and where we may or may not become robots by the end of it. But yeah, we'll be talking about that next. You can find us on Patreon, because we're not mentioning the website formerly known as Twitter anymore in this podcast. We've just mentioned it, but it's like I think we have moved off the free racism and worse website. You can find us on the page. Yeah.
The AI thing, which they're doing nothing about.
Yep. Very much so. But we can still be found on Patreon at the Thom and Jerry Show. Thom is spelled with a H. If you want us to talk about, I don't know, Megadeth's peace cells, throw money at us and we will talk about peace cells. Bass is very good. Good record. Lots of Dave doing guitar. I mean, frankly, if we're going to talk about Megadeth albums, I prefer to talk Rust in Peace. But if you want to talk to us and talk about peace cells, then we can, and then we can be the new But this has been a fun episode. It's nice to revisit. It's nice to revisit even an album I listen to on like a weekly basis. We do this sometimes. We just go, hey, yes, absolutely, there is going to be like more column inches about this than probably any other album that album celebrating anniversary this year. But hey, we like Master of Puppets. It's a good album.
Absolutely.
Right, so we will see you on the next Thom and Joe episode, which as we said earlier, is Discovery. Like, subscribe, suggest, talk about Master of Puppets, because hey, we'd love to hear what you think about it, because you might find the one person in the universe who doesn't like Master of Puppets. We would be fascinated to find you and sort of go, yes, but why? And that sort of thing. But we'll see you on the next episode. I've been Thom.
I've been Joe, and I've got to go to the bathroom.